At last, I'm free from that burden. Starting today, I'm moving in with my folks at my place. Just as my parents passed away. My husband, Matt, who had torn down our family home, said this to me as I stood in shock where our house once stood. "What are you saying? Lost your marbles? LOL, hurry up and bring the inheritance over to my house." I burst into laughter at his words. I see. So that's what this was all about. What? Why are you laughing? Don't you guys know? Know what? Matt and my in-laws looked at me quizzically as I started laughing. To these three, I revealed the truth. My name is Mia. I was born as the eldest daughter to ordinary office worker parents. I have one brother. Just a regular family. I married my husband, Matt, when I was 29, and we had 2 kids. I juggled work and parenting, and before I knew it, I was already 55. My son, Bob, and my daughter, Kathy, have grown up to become fine professionals. They're both living on their own now, navigating their new careers. With that, it's time for some peace with my husband. It's been an ordinary life, but a happy one. I always thought I'd just grow old like this. Then, one day in winter, everything changed. My father had an accident and suddenly passed away. He was only 72 at the time. The sudden loss of my normally energetic father caused our family great sorrow. My mother was especially affected, being so grief-stricken that she couldn't even eat. "Mom, I know you're sad, but you have to eat." I kept telling her that. "I know, but I just don't feel like eating. It feels like there's something stuck in my chest." Thinking that this came from her grief and mental stress, my brother and I decided to keep watch on her for a while. But then, in just half a month, she visibly lost weight. Concerned, I took her to the hospital. What, cancer? The diagnosis the doctor gave my mother left me stunned. The cancer was at an advanced stage and apparently inoperable, meaning she only had about a year left to live. I haven't even had the chance to repay her for everything that she's done for me. Just as I was coping with my dad's passing, now this with my mom. I was more devastated than when I lost my father. But it's not like I can stay in mourning forever. My brother lives far away, so I can't rely on him. That means it's up to me to help my mom. I immediately told my husband Matt that I wanted to move in with my mother. I can't leave her alone, both physically and mentally, to deal with sickness. But Matt's reaction was not what I expected. "Huh, we just finished a funeral, and now I have to deal with your parents again." He said this with a sigh, as if it were a hassle. "You don't have to say it like that. Can't you just help her with hospital visits? Do we really have to live together? I think she might feel lonely. If you're really against it, maybe I could just stay at my parents' house for a while." I suggested this. And Matt responded indignantly. "What, and who's going to cook for me while you're gone?" "I'll come and make meals, of course." "And what about cleaning? Who's going to do the laundry?" I fell silent, overwhelmed. I intended to do what I could, but I couldn't keep everything as it was before. His point struck a nerve. Being told that it's selfish to want to help and take care of my mother, I feel like I can't say anything. I'm sure my mother, being considerate, would say it's okay to continue our lives as usual. But I desperately wanted to show my gratitude to her. "Fine, but just so you know, I'm not helping at all." As I remained silent, Matt reluctantly agreed. Although he was arrogant, he eventually gave in. "I'm sorry, thank you." I thought he was being a terrible person, but he did also agree to my request. I suppressed my urge to argue back, and thanked him. Despite the dispute, Matt and I started living with my mother at my family home. We had been living in a company house provided by Matt's company. Matt is an only child. His father had wanted to live together. So there were no plans to buy a home of our own, expecting to eventually move in with his parents. Living in company housing was convenient for commuting, and not too expensive, around $300 a month. But moving to my family home eliminated that cost, and we got more space. For Matt, I think moving in wasn't completely without merit. Although he didn't help as he had declared, I was glad to be able to live with my mother. She seemed well, but often appeared tired and would lie down during the day. I made meals for my mother, fed her, and prepared her medication. Doing this alone would have been impossible for her. Sorry, Mia, thank you, it's such a relief having you here. I should thank Matt too. My mother often expressed her gratitude to us. She was unaware of Matt's harsh words about living together, so she seemed grateful to him as well. One night, after my mother went to bed, Matt came home. As I served dinner, I brought up the issue again, about Mom's treatment. Matt glared at me sharply and said, "I don't know what you want me to do. I told you I'm not helping," refusing even to listen. I too have moments when I want to express my worries or discuss something. I just wanted Matt to listen. But his attitude didn't change, not after a month, not even after 2. He constantly grumbled about living together, acting as if he had done something noble. His behavior became increasingly difficult day by day. Yet, I couldn't say anything in response. I was accumulating stress, worried about my mother while trying to be considerate of Matt. As the 1-year prognosis approached, my mother's health rapidly declined, leading to hospitalization. 3 days later, she passed away. Even though I had prepared myself mentally, I was deeply saddened. My brother's family and my children came right away, but during such times, you really wish to have your husband by your side. However, Matt was sitting in a corner, laughing with his parents, and not helping with the funeral preparations. My brother took on the role of the chief mourner, and somehow, we managed to prepare for the funeral. But Matt, who should have been sitting with the bereaved family, was at the very back of the relatives section. "Matt, I wish you would sit in the family section." When I said this, Matt responded, "No, I'm fine here. I'm not a blood relative, after all. But you're my husband." Then his mother, who was listening, chimed in. "He may be your husband, but he's not your mother's son, right? Matt is my son, an outsider, a stranger here." "That's right, we're the only ones here related to Matt. Mia, you should sit in the family section." To think that even my in-laws would say this, I was silenced. Although customs like only blood relatives sitting in the family section vary by region. In our area, it's common for the son-in-law to sit there too. Sure enough, with Matt not in the family section, distant relatives started whispering, wondering if we had divorced. It's one thing for people to gossip, but such issues could have been avoided if Matt had just sat there. Despite feeling a bit resentful towards Matt for not being by my side, we managed to see my mother off peacefully. After the funeral, we returned home with my brother's family, my children, Matt, and my in-laws. Thank you, father-in-law and mother-in-law, for coming during this busy time. I expressed my gratitude to my in-laws for attending and served them tea. Then, they said with a laugh, "Really, just when we thought we'd finished dealing with your dad's passing, now it's your mom. Condolences aren't cheap, you know, haha. Well, at least, it's all over now." I was stunned by their words. I couldn't fathom what they meant by saying such a thing. It was simply unbelievable to me. I forced a smile and left the room. Then, I overheard Matt and his parents talking behind me. "It must have been tough for you, Matt, living with someone who's not family." Yay, Mia's whims were really trying. As a husband, you don't always have to give in to your wife. It's okay to say no to things you don't like in a marriage. I clenched my fists tightly. Their laughter and conversation were so irritating and frustrating, but this wasn't a new thing. My in-laws have always been this insensitive and rude. When I was marrying Matt, His mother bluntly said, "Couldn't you find someone prettier? I'm worried about what the grandchildren will look like, Haga." And his father added, "They say you get tired of a beautiful woman in 3 days, but with Mia, there's no risk of that happening." Matt just laughed, finding it funny. They were such a disrespectful family. I felt like something inside me snapped. Looking back, neither my in-laws nor Matt had ever shown concern for me. Not during my father's funeral, nor after my mother passed away. Instead, they only mocked me with their words. I had felt sorry for forcing Matt to live with my mother and but now, I questioned how he was acting as a person. I had only wanted to care for my mother, but now I realized that I had been too considerate of Matt. If he had been supportive, it might have been different, but he wasn't, so I had no reason to feel this guilty towards him. Behind my rising anger, Matt and his parents continued to laugh and chat. If my brother's family or my children had heard, they would have been upset, but fortunately, they were all in the kitchen. I was the only one who heard their conversation in the other room, which was a relief. As I pondered this, I heard my mother-in-law's voice again. "Mia." "Yes." I snapped to attention and responded, "Can I have this?" My mother-in-law approached me, holding my mother's bag in her hand. As I stood there, not knowing what my mother-in-law meant, she happily clarified. "Your mother won't use it anymore, right? Matt said I should take it. Maybe I'll just keep it." She said this as she held up the bag, assessing it like it was an item for sale. It was outrageous, considering the funeral had just ended. I took the bag and said, "No, you can't." "What?" Her eyes changed in an instant. Her expression seemed to say that she was angry at me, her daughter-in-law, for standing up to her, rather than over losing the bag. Still, I stood my ground and said, "I'm not ready to sort through my mother's belongings yet. We'll divide her things among family members later." My mother-in-law turned red with anger. "What do you mean? Are you saying I'm not a member of your family? You just said at the funeral that Matt is basically a stranger to my mom. How come he's a stranger, but your family?" I retorted without thinking. Hearing this, Matt and my father-in-law also turned bright red. "What are you saying? Apologize to Mom. How dare you, as a daughter-in-law, say such disrespectful things?" Eventually, the commotion caught the attention of everyone else, who had been in another room. I didn't expect to be called a stranger after all the effort we put into the funeral and cremation. "Let's go home." My mother-in-law, having yelled at me in front of everyone, said this and left our house. For some reason, even Matt was angry and went home with his parents. "What happened? Did you really call your mother-in-law a stranger?" Having heard only my mother-in-law's side, everyone asked me the same thing. I can imagine how, taken out of context, it would sound like I was the cruel one. But I explained the situation to everyone. Not a single person blamed me. Grandma and Grandpa should really consider other people's feelings more. It's the same with Dad. That family has always been like that. The kids sided with me, but I just couldn't forgive those 3. Matt didn't come home for a while after that day. I hadn't contacted him either. I didn't think I should be the one to apologize, and I didn't feel like I could forgive him even if he did. But I knew we couldn't go on like this forever. On a day when I was pondering this, Matt came home. "Welcome back." Seeing his face reignited my anger, but I suppressed it and welcomed him. Then, Matt said, "I bet it's been tough, right?" His words were blunt, but I was surprised by this show of concern. "Take the kids and go on a trip. It'll be a change of scenery for you." And with that, he handed me travel vouchers. I was speechless. Rather than words, my tears started to flow. Maybe the kids had put him up to it. Even if that was the case, I was happy that Matt had gone along with it. I did as he suggested and immediately contacted the kids to plan the trip. Huh, Dad did. That's unusual for him. However, the kids seemed surprised by my proposal. Apparently, it really was a gift from Matt. I wonder if he felt bad for me. I said this with a laugh. And I gratefully decided to accept the travel vouchers from Matt. Well then, I guess I'll be going. Yeah, take it easy, and while you're at it, stay over at the kids' places too. What, I can be away that long? It's fine, I'll relax at my parents' place, so don't worry about me. Matt said as he saw me off. Kathy happily welcomed the idea of my visit, so before the trip, I visited Kathy's and Bob's homes. Since I couldn't visit them while caring for my mother, I helped out a bit with their housework, like making and freezing ready-to-eat meals. Mom, you're not relaxing at all, but it's a big help, thank you. Both of them were really happy to have my cooking at home. It was all thanks to Matt's suggestion. Then came the long-awaited hot springs trip. With the kids, I spent a relaxing time at the hot springs. It seemed to heal a lot of the fatigue from caregiving and the sadness of losing my parents. We ended up being away for almost a week, but both kids returned to their homes with bright smiles. That was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while. True, once in a while, but I wonder if he's up to something. LOL. Paffy said this with a joking smile. Don't say that. I'm sure your father did what he thought was best in his own way. I said, laughing. I headed home, planning to share all the memories of this trip with Matt, and, as a couple, look forward to a happy life ahead. However, when I arrived home, I was speechless. What's going on? The house is. I looked around frantically, checking my surroundings. Despite being in a familiar place, the family home that should have been there was gone. Then, out of nowhere, Matt appeared. Behind him were his parents. Seeing me standing there in shock, they all had smirks on their faces. Matt, what's going on? I asked Matt. Then, like his parents, with an unsettling smile, he said, Finally, the burden is gone. From today, we're living with my parents in my house. What are you talking about? I retorted calmly to Matt, who spoke so arrogantly. Then Matt opened his mouth. Have you lost your mind? LOL, your family home has been demolished. Hurry up and bring the inheritance to our house. Anything you inherited now belongs to Matt, you know. LOL. I understood then. It became clear that the disappearance of the house was Matt's doing, and it was all for the sake of the inheritance. After coming home with so many farts about the future, I couldn't believe the scale of his betrayal. I was unbearably frustrated and sad. But even if they went to the extent of demolishing the house, things would never go exactly how Matt wanted them to. I fought, as if I'd let them. Facing the smirking trio, I suddenly burst out laughing. Seeing me laughing uncontrollably, both my father-in-law and Matt had puzzled expressions. What's this? Why are you laughing? What a weird woman. Have you gone crazy? My mother-in-law looked at me as if she was seeing something eerie. Facing the three of them, I opened my mouth. Don't you know? Know what? Then I said to Matt, I didn't inherit a single cent, so there's no inheritance, LOL. After saying that, I started laughing again. Maybe they misunderstood and thought I'd become rich from the inheritance. I couldn't stop laughing at the three of them for their wild assumptions and actions. What do you mean? Explain yourself. Matt demanded. But I remained silent. I felt that there was no need to enlighten them. More importantly, I won't live with strangers. If the three of you want to live together, you can do it without me. My rejection of Matt's proposal to live together, along with me ignoring his question, ignited my mother-in-law's anger. You help with your own parents' housework but won't help with ours. There were reasons for that, as you well know, right? Didn't I end up agreeing to live with your mother? I told you that you didn't have to. Are you forgetting that you chose to live together because you didn't want to do the housework? Faced with my responses, both Matt and my mother-in-law bit their lips. Destroying my family home without asking. There are right and wrong ways to do things. I shouted at the three of them right there. Then, I walked away. Behind me, Matt's voice called out, "Where are you going?" But I didn't look back. I had to secure a place to sleep for tonight. I couldn't worry about anything else, and I really didn't want to see Matt's face. I immediately sought legal advice. Demolishing a house isn't something that can be done easily. The house is still in my mother's name. Wondering which contractor had taken on the job, I discovered an unbelievable truth. Matt and my father-in-law had demolished it themselves, just the two of them. My father-in-law, who works in demolition, had meticulously planned it, asking acquaintances for help and renting heavy machinery. What's more, they had even gifted me the travel voucher to get me out of the house. I felt so foolish and betrayed, almost to tears, and incredibly frustrated. Is there any way to punish the three of them? I asked this through tears, and the lawyer gave me a kind smile. You can file for damages against Matt for demolishing the house, which is still in your mother's name, under destruction of property. Let's start by getting an apology from Matt and his parents. I nodded at those words. Afterward, the lawyer immediately began the legal process. A few days later, Matt, having learned of the situation, called me, furious. "What's this legal notice about?" "Oh, you got it. Well, my precious home was destroyed. I'll have to be compensated for it." Compensated? We said we were moving into my family home, right? We demolished an empty house for you. You should be thanking us, not asking for compensation. Now, bring the inheritance and come over here. Matt said arrogantly. I should thank you for destroying my home without my permission. Don't make me laugh. And what's this about bringing you the inheritance? There's no inheritance to speak of. I yelled back into the phone. Matt fell silent, unable to respond. It seemed he was taken aback by my yelling, something I rarely do. This is exactly why I laughed when the house was demolished. I had a year to spend with my mother. It was obvious that we talked about inheritance. That's when I said, I don't want anything, give it all to my brother. So, all the cash and securities were inherited by my brother. In return, he said that I could have the house, since he lives far away and can't properly manage it. If I'm not living there, I could rent it out. That was the plan for me to inherit this house. Anyway, you and your father-in-law either restore the family home to its original state or pay the amount written. Such an amount. I was considering settling this out of court. If you can't pay, however, I'll file an official complaint and sue. I said this with a firm attitude. Sorry, I didn't expect you to be so angry. Of course I'm angry. Matt began to make excuses. He apparently thought that if my family home remained standing, he wouldn't be able to live with his parents, especially his father-in-law, who had always wanted to live together. He liked Bob and wanted to live with him. It was Matt who refused to live together back then, because the commute would be difficult. But his in-laws seemed to think I was the one against it. So, he used this as an opportunity to demolish my family home, convincing his in-laws I'd move in with the inheritance. But, even given that excuse now, the fact remains that it's unforgivable. So, please, forgive me, I didn't mean any harm. Dad's regretting it too. If he were truly remorseful, then all the more reason for you two to agree to the settlement. I said that and hung up the phone. Matt kept calling me and sending messages to apologize. If you're truly sorry, hurry up and transfer the money. LOL. I pushed Matt away like that. I knew the family home couldn't be restored, but I had no other way to process these unbearable feelings. Afterward, I stayed at Kathy's house. Both my brother's family and the kids knew about the situation. Even though my brother must be angry about our family home being destroyed. He said, "I won't interfere, but I'll lend a hand if you need it. Mia, do what you want to do." Everyone condemned Matt's actions and supported me. A month went by without any damages or other compensation being paid. During this time, there's been no contact from Matt. I can't keep relying on Kathy forever. I need to get the money quickly and at least establish a stable life for myself. Contrary to my hopes, something unbelievable happened. I realized it from Kathy's comment. "This apron kind of looks like Grandma's." She muttered this while showing me her smartphone screen. Looking at the screen, my eyes widened in shock. It was a product page on a flea market app. The apron Kathy said resembled my mother's was a one-of-a-kind item I had made for her. "What's going on? This is Grandma's apron. There's no doubt I'm the one who made it." "Really?" Kathy exclaimed and quickly started checking other pages. The seller seemed to have only recently registered, with no transaction history or ratings yet. When I checked the items listed for sale, which were nearly 30 in total, to my astonishment, they all belonged to my mother. I immediately realized what was happening. It must be Matt's doing. No one else but Matt, who had demolished the house, could have taken my mother's belongings. I immediately called Matt. "Hey, are you using that app? What's going on?" "App? What app?" Matt responded with an air of annoyance. Thinking he was playing dumb, I became furious. "Don't play dumb. You're selling my mother's belongings without permission, aren't you? Cancel the listings right now." Then Matt replied in a fluster. "What? No, it wasn't me. Who else would do such a thing besides you? I'm coming over to get everything back right now." I hung up the phone and immediately headed to my in-laws' house with Kathy. "Where are my mother's belongings?" As soon as we arrived at my in-laws' house, I called out for Matt. Confronting Matt at the entrance, I demanded answers. "I don't know anything about it." "Kathy, back me up here. Matt, tell the truth." Kathy also sided with me, pressing Matt for answers. Matt was clearly flustered. While this was happening, my in-laws noticed our presence and came out. "Oh, Kathy, you're here." My mother-in-law smiled happily at the sight of Kathy. With visible anger, Kathy said to her, "Grandma, tell Dad to speak the truth." "The truth?" "Dad seems to be selling Grandma's things from when she passed away." At Kathy's words, my mother-in-law burst into laughter. Matt frowned in distress, repeating, "It really wasn't me." Then, my mother-in-law said loudly, "Matt selling them? LOL, no way." "But, because I'm the one selling them, LOL." At those words, I felt the blood drain from my face. Matt must have known. His face said this is bad as he looked at his mother. Despite Kathy's shock, his mother was in a cheerful mood. "What did you say?" "It's a lot of work, you know. I have to pack everything carefully and take good photos for the listings." She spoke of the app with excitement, seemingly unaware she was selling stolen items. I had to restrain myself from lunging at her. "Cancel the listings. Those aren't yours to sell at will." Kathy, red-faced and tearful, pleaded with her grandmother. But her grandmother seemed displeased. "What's the problem? I finally found a hobby I enjoy. I use what I can and sell what I can't for some pocket money. It's good for preventing dementia. As the only grandma left, you want me to stay healthy and live long, right, Kathy?" She said this nonchalantly. Even when we begged her to stop, there was no sign of remorse. If talking to her won't help, then we have to take action. "Kathy, let's go home," I said. "But it's okay." I practically dragged Kathy out of the house. And then, we headed straight to the police station. I hadn't planned to file a complaint about the house being demolished, but theft is a different matter. When I told the police that my mother's belongings were stolen and being sold without permission, they acted immediately. The flea market act also responded swiftly, suspending my mother-in-law's account. This ensured that nothing more would be sold, bringing some relief. On the way back from the police station, I called Matt. "I've had your mother's account stopped. You knew about it too, didn't you? That makes you an accomplice." "No, I've filed a complaint with the police. Please cooperate with the investigation." Matt was in a panic at my words. "What? But we're family, right? Stop the investigation, please." "But we're strangers, aren't we? LOL. I still haven't received any damages or compensation for the demolished house, and I see no sign of remorse from you." Faced with me yelling at him, Matt was at a loss. "But I am not a monster. Regardless of my in-laws, I do have feelings for Matt, having lived together for so long." Sighing, I say, "I'll wait for the money, but I do not intend to forgive the theft. I want everything returned. And your father-in-law, he looked quite pale. Did he go to the hospital?" "Nah. I'm not a monster, so I'll just leave it at that." I said that and hung up the phone. I had just seen my father-in-law for the first time in a while. He hardly spoke, and he was so thin it was hard to believe it had only been a few months since we last met. His complexion was beyond pale, almost deathly. It was obvious he wasn't healthy. But his wife and son probably hadn't noticed. My mother-in-law, nonchalantly planning to sell stolen goods, and Matt, who only acts tough around me. Those two just don't have any consideration for others. The next day, I received a call from my father-in-law. I thought he was going to thank me, but it was the complete opposite. "What do you mean treating me like a sick person, planning to dump me in a hospital to get rid of me? I have to protect my wife and Matt from you." "I'm not going to any hospital," he scolded me over the phone. Here I was, worried about him, and this is what I get. "I'm sorry for overstepping my boundaries. I was just concerned." "Humph, I'm not frail and short-lived like your parents. Don't make a fool of me." His words angered me, but a few days later, he apparently went to the hospital as he was feeling unwell. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Matt called me in a panic. "Dad has terminal cancer. What am I going to do?" But I just snorted. "I don't know. Remember what he said when I suggested going to the hospital. I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Let him handle it himself." "How could you think that you could be so heartless?" "Who's the heartless one here? Did you offer even a single word of kindness when my mother was sick? Think about what you've done." I said that and hung up the phone. As expected, my father-in-law passed away shortly thereafter. As a human being, I didn't want to harbor negative feelings towards someone who had died. But recalling everything he had done and said, I couldn't shed a single tear. After his funeral, we found his will. Despite his claims of not being short-lived, I was amazed at how well prepared my father-in-law was. "The house goes to my grandson, Bob. The rest of my assets are to be split between my wife and eldest son." I was surprised to hear Bob's name mentioned. Indeed, my father-in-law was particularly fond of Bob, always saying he wanted to live with him. He must have wanted Bob to live in the house even after he was gone. For Bob, it was a troublesome situation. "Renounce the inheritance. You don't need that house, do you?" I told this to Bob, but he was actually happy to receive the house. With inheritance tax involved, there was no real benefit for Bob. Initially, I thought the house was an unwelcome legacy, but if Bob is happy with it, there's nothing more for me to say. Bob inherited the house as per his grandfather's will. My mother-in-law was delighted and paid the inheritance tax. "It's only natural. He's the heir to our family," she said. Well, she wasn't wrong. I felt a bit down, feeling like I had lost Bob, but then something unbelievable happened. "Come over." Upon receiving that message from Matt, I immediately headed to my in-laws' house. There, like I had once been, stood my mother-in-law and Matt, frozen in shock in front of the house. In front of the house were heavy machinery, trucks with demolition company logos, and workers. And there it was, the in-laws' house being demolished right before our eyes. "What's going on?" "It's my house, I can do whatever I want with it, right?" Bob, appearing from somewhere, looked satisfied watching his grandparents' house being torn down. "Bob, what are you doing? Stop this immediately." "Even if I stop now, it's not like you can live in it anymore, haha." "Bob, how could you do this?" My mother-in-law and Matt pleaded with Bob, crying. But Bob just laughed. "Did you forget what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom?" Bob: "Grandma, didn't you also do terrible things to Mom? Did you ever apologize?" With a swift change of expression, Bob glared sharply at my mother-in-law and Matt. The two of them fell to their knees. The heavy machinery continued to noisily demolish the in-laws' house. In that scene, I finally felt a sense of relief. Later, Matt and my mother-in-law, using the inherited assets, finally paid me compensation and damages for the stolen goods they took from my mother. "You have me and Kathy, Mom." At these words from Bob, I finally let myself cry tears of relief. My mother-in-law and Matt lost their house and were left without any money, now living in company housing again. Matt and I had left that company housing once, and now he's returned there with his mother. Their sudden return has become the subject of gossip. I heard about this from the wife of one of Matt's colleagues, with whom I'm on good terms. So, I took the opportunity to honestly explain to her exactly what happened. They'll probably feel uncomfortable living in the company housing from now on, but it's their own doing. Furthermore, after Matt's resignation, the two of them, having lost their place to live, are now forced to save money to prepare for their future home. I think I might occasionally ask my friends about how they're living, just as a topic of conversation. I had been staying at Kathy's house, but then Bob decided to get married. He's planning to build a new house on this occasion. The land of the in-laws' house sold for a decent amount, and I'm glad to know that even that house turned out to be useful. "Mom, why don't you come live with us?" Bob made this offer to me. His fiancée also warmly welcomed the idea, which I'm very grateful for. Since I couldn't stay at Kathy's forever, I decided to take up Bob's kind offer. I am determined to live happily with my new family and not become a mother-in-law like my own.